Greetings everybody! I'm going to rank or rate the books that are apparently the scariest books to read according to Goodreads. So at the time that I'm recording this, these are the top 10 scariest books according to Goodreads, and while I like a lot of these books, I have to disagree with the verdict on some of them. So please forgive me, I did make this list probably about a month ago and I don't remember if there were a couple of other things in a few of these spots, but I haven't read them so I couldn't comment on them obviously. So I think actually this might just be 10 of, maybe out of 15, out of the top 15 or something. So anyway, I put them in order as ranked by Goodreads and we're going to go through them. So coming in at number 10 for the apparently scariest, the 10th scariest story is Bram Stoker's Dracula. So this is kind of hard. I'm going to tell you up front as well, this is an arbitrary topic and a video because what's scary is so subjective that, I mean, people can make lists all day about their scariest reads. I have, but to just sort of like proclaim them the scariest, I guess the way that Goodreads have done this is they've taken like top rated or something, but I don't really know how Goodreads does these lists because I've noticed with the Goodreads Choice Awards, for example, Stephen King is always nominated in the horror category regardless of what genre the book he's released is in. So I've seen a few Stephen King books that weren't horror at all in the best horror category, so I don't know how they decide these lists, but if you know, please tell me in the comments because I would be fascinated to know, but I'm just not fascinated to try and find out myself. Anyway, Bram Stoker's Dracula. So this, I'm sure everyone is familiar with the story, some iteration of it. You've probably seen at least one Dracula film, and even if you haven't, this character is so just sort of in the zeitgeist that everyone knows what and who Dracula is. But the novel is written in sort of epistolary format. There's letters and diaries and things, and it's about Dracula, who summons Jonathan Harker to his castle in Transylvania because he's buying property in London, and Harker's the lawyer that's been sent to sort it all out. And then Dracula comes over to London and, you know, wreaks havoc here. And something that people don't know about the book if they haven't read it is that Dracula is discussed a lot and the effects of Dracula are seen a lot, but he's not in a lot of the book. There's not a lot of like Dracula, like as in like the character to absorb, and he's very one-dimensional. But he is a scary villain because he's, you know, picking victims. He's got no morality, humanity, anything like that. So he's basically just sort of a serial killing sociopath and a monster as well, you know, more powerful than everybody else. I think that the concept is scary and the book is atmospheric if you can like get into it. I didn't personally find it a scary read though, and I don't remember being particularly scared by any scenes. That said, I read hundreds of horror books a year, and I've just been reading horror since I was a kid, so I'm probably, it's weird because in books I'm quite desensitized to things that actually scare me. It's quite hard to actually make me frightened, but in real life I'm scared of everything, so that's odd. But anyway, number 9. Oh no, I didn't take off books that I haven't read because there's one on this list that I haven't read, and this is just this one. So number 9 is Ghost Story by Peter Straub. I haven't read it, so I can't comment on it, but if you've read it, let me know what you think, because I do actually have that on my TBR shelf downstairs and I was thinking of picking it up soon. So let me know if it's a scary read as far as you're concerned anyway. I would love to know what your thoughts on that are. Number 8, I thought this was a weird one, Lord of the Flies. I mean, there's disturbing stuff in this book, sure, but I mean, I guess it depends on what you find scary. So that's about a group of kids that are stuck on an island. I think they like crashed on a beach somehow or something, and the kids have, you know, something's happened and they're stranded, and the kids sort of, they're no adults, and they, you know, get pack mentality thing kind of going, and they kind of go feral. And there is some disturbing stuff in, like, there's horrific stuff in it, but it's not it's not what I would call a horror story. I guess that's subjective as well. There's a lot of people that quibble about what the parameters of what the horror genre are. I guess this would be horror for some people, but I just don't think it reads like a horror story, if that makes any sense. It just reads like I say just, like, not like that it's beneath horror or anything, but it reads like a like a psychological character study. So I don't know, I don't find it scary at all, but I was emotionally connected to it though, and I'd feel a lot when I was reading it. Number 7, The Haunting of Hill House, which I read after I watched the Mike Flanagan adaptation. So this, I think The Haunting of Hill House is creepy. I'm not typically sold on ghosts though. I think that if it's done well, a ghost film will get me way more than a book, but that's because of there's this like sort of musical score thing with, like, I don't know what instrument they're using. I think it's a cello. There's this horrible wibbly sound that comes into ghost films typically that just, like, it's so low you barely notice it, but it makes you feel anxious. And I think the sound design on ghost films that I find scary has a lot to do with why I'm scared rather than it is a ghost. But that's a harder sell for me personally in a book if it's something haunting. But the writing, it's a gothic masterpiece and it is spooky. I did feel spooked. Number 6, Stephen King's Carrie, and you're going to see Stephen King a few more times. So is it scary? I wasn't scared. But again, this is about a girl with telekinetic powers whose mum is a religious zealot, basically. She's quite extreme, and, like, you know, she hasn't even told Carrie, like, about, you know, periods and things because she thinks it's dirty and unclean, even the hypocrisy, but whatever. So Carrie is a girl, the least popular girl in the entire school, gets bullied, all of the girls are vile to her, none of the boys ever look at her, she's a complete social pariah. And then she's got these powers and they start coming out more after she gets her period, quite late, and after a series of horrible things are done to her. So there are scenes of horror in this book, but I wasn't scared by it because I don't know what this says about me, but I was kind of like, go Carrie! So this was more of a good for her kind of read to me, even though it's very tragic. Number 5, I did find this one scary, Pet Sematary by Stephen King. So this one is one of the books that comes up over and over when people are talking about which Stephen King books are the scariest. Again, this is so subjective. This book is the best handling of grief that I have ever read by miles and miles and miles. In fact, I think the grief, even though most of us have experienced grief, and we all will, I think it's really hard to translate for some reason in a book, because I've read a lot of books where people have died and I just haven't felt like the gut punch that the protagonist is feeling and stuff. I guess it's in the way you tell it, and it's a weird one that I think authors actually struggle to connect with readers with grief like that, considering it's such a universal emotion that we can all empathize. So I don't know what it is about how to depict grief that really is the key, but Pet Sematary it's never going to be, I don't think it's ever going to be outdone for how well King wrote that. And this one did get me. I think if you have kids it'll be worse. I don't have any children, so the element of Pet Sematary that got me is the sometimes dead is better, sometimes what goes in the ground ain't what comes out, all of that element of it was scary, and I thought that the book was, it's just done so well because it just puts you in such a particular headspace that when the really scary, horrible stuff starts happening, your empathy is, you're so engaged with the protagonist that you can't help but feel absolutely horrified. So I would say Pet Sematary is scary, not terrifying, probably not like the kind of thing that would make you want to sleep with the lights on, but it is scary. Number 4, very scared by this book, The Exorcist. So I think this one is actually, even though this is one of the most famous stories of all time, the film is I don't think that any possession film has ever outdone The Exorcist, personally. The book is scary as I listened to the audiobook that was read by the author, and he really got into it, and I cannot and have never been able to get the phrase "the sow is mine" out of my head since listening to that audiobook. And I also read the paperback as well. If you want to be scared and you enjoy audiobooks, The Exorcist is a really great one if you get the one that's narrated by William Peter Blatty. It's really scary, and I don't know what else to say. I don't believe in demons. I'm not religious. I don't believe in God or the devil. Somehow this story really got under my skin. I guess there's something about the loss of your bodily autonomy, but while you're still in your body, and all of that kind of going on. Maybe I've woven what scares me into, like, there are, you know, mental health parallels in possession stories, so maybe that's what's got me. But also the atmosphere is creepy, the demon is scary, everything happening is horrifying. So I do think that The Exorcist should be in this top 10 personally. I think it should be further up, like number 1 personally, but we've got a couple more to go. So number 3 by Stephen King, Salem's Lot. Now, I was scared reading this one. There's the atmosphere of this one is what got me, and I agree, for me this belongs in the top 10 of scary books, and quite far up the list. I think this is probably appropriately placed as well. So Salem's Lot is about a writer that goes to a place called Jerusalem's Lot, like moves there, and they just call it the Lot, and there are vampires. A vampire, Barlow, has moved in, and clearly he's a vampire from the get-go. It's not really a spoiler. And then, you know, the town starts to change, and I don't know how Stephen King scared me so much with this story, because there are a lot of King fans that say this was a boring read. So people tend to be either in kind of my camp with it, where they find it really scary, and then there are other people that thought it was a complete snooze fest. But I like a slow burn, and I trust Stephen King when he's doing something with a slow burn. He does give you like the explosive ending that you want. He never people always say that Stephen King can't write endings, and it's such bullshit. Sorry, this is a mini rant. So screen adaptations, sure, but I don't think it's fair to judge Stephen King by the adaptations of his work, because he isn't writing the films or directing. Well, a couple of exceptions, but you know, we won't talk about those. But yeah, generally speaking, it's not Stephen King's fault if a film has badly approached the source material, hasn't captured the atmosphere or the feel of the book. A lot of the time the endings are changed. A lot of the time for the film's story elements are changed, it's going to affect the ending. I typically think I think that Stephen King writes good endings most of the time. There are a couple, like the one that doesn't land for me, and a lot of people say this, and this is the one they use as the example, is Under the Dome. I did get to the end of Under the Dome and think, what? I know I'm not alone in that, but generally I think he's quite good at tying up his narrative. So anyway, that's my rant. You can come at me in the comments if you disagree. We can have a chat about that. That would be really fun. Everyone's opinion's valid, obviously, but I think that Stephen King does good endings, and this is not the Stephen King podcast, so we're going to move on. Although this is Goodreads' fault. It's made me do this. So anyway, Salem's Lot, I would say, is scary. The atmosphere, it's like a slow build, but there's a really palpable, horrible, creepy feeling as the town starts to change and some of the people in it change. And the images that were conjured for me, and the, like, oh, it's making me uncomfortable talking about it. So yeah, that one I agree with. Number 2, guess what? Stephen King again, is The Shining. Now, is The Shining scary? I think that the horror was better captured in the book than the Stanley Kubrick film. I don't really like the mini-series, although I do love Steven Weber. And I was happy to see a version of The Shining on screen that was much more faithful to what the book was actually about, which is a family breakdown, whereas the Kubrick version of The Shining is Jack's an asshole and looks like he could snap at any second right from the get-go. So I feel like the Kubrick version is a really great horror film that completely missed the point of the book. It's not a good adaptation, but it's a good horror film, I think, in my opinion. The book, I don't know, I wasn't scared reading the book, I have to say. I really enjoyed it. That's not to like lessen my love of the story. It's a really good story of family dynamics, but again, ghosts are such a hard sell for me, so I was very interested and entertained, but I wasn't scared at all by The Shining. And number one, guess what? Do you want to put your guesses in the comments actually for what you think the number one, according to Goodreads, the scariest book ever, the number one spot is? I'm going to give you a second to do that. Barry wanted to say something too, so I'll just let him take over while you're just typing your guesses. If you don't subscribe, Kaylee's going to become a ghost. See how scary she finds him then. What did you just say? Alright, so if you guessed Stephen King again, you're correct, and apparently the scariest book ever according to Goodreads is It. Now, It is my favourite Stephen King book. It's one of my favourite books of all time. I love it. I think that the mini-series really the original mini-series with Tim Curry, I think it really captured the atmosphere, the characters, the tone, the feeling of Derry, everything. I think that the mini-series did a really great job of really getting the feel of the book right. I think that the more recent film adaptations with Bill Skarsgård, who is amazing, I think there is some scary stuff in there, but tonally that was all over the place, and I don't know, I didn't really find the film scary, although that scene in, there are two scenes in chapter 2, the opening with the couple and the guy that's thrown into the water and he can see Pennywise like on the bank, that was scary, and also that scene with the girl in the bleachers, that was scary. But I think that overall the films haven't done a great job of nailing the horror. Now, I don't remember what specifically I found scary in the book, and I was about to say I love it, but I didn't find it scary really to read. I wasn't scared reading it, but then I remembered that I used to work a night job in this club, and I was behind a desk that people just didn't tend to come to until like 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'd be there from 6. So I used to take books in, and I remember taking It in, and I was reading it, and someone tapped on the glass because I had like a glass pane in front of me, and I screamed and flung the book in the air because I was so startled, and I guess I was really engrossed and really scared as I was reading, and I had a huge queue that I hadn't noticed was forming, and people had been trying to get my attention, so I was like really in. So I did find the book scary, evidently. I just can't tell you why. I don't remember what the scene, I don't remember if I felt that way for the whole book, because my takeaway memory of reading the book is that I really loved the Losers Club, the characters, and so that's, I think of it fondly. I get like, I feel wholesome about it, so I guess I don't remember being scared, but I definitely was. So overall, Goodreads, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these are Stephen King books, and I'm not disrespecting King at all. I think that he's a really good storyteller, like possibly the best storyteller in the world, and I love his books. I've read everything that he's published so far, and I think I've only actively disliked 2 of them. I've enjoyed everything else, but I think to have 5 of his books taking the top spots, I suspect this is more people are leaving reviews because he's always, every single book he puts out is a bestseller, and I think that this is more like notoriety than like engaging what people are actually finding scary. Like, I don't know if this is going off star reads or what, or how they've compiled this list. I guess I would say that Salem's Lot, The Exorcist, and Sematary do belong there though, so that is 3. But I will say this, where's Adam Neville? if you've been following the channel for any length of time, or you read my reviews on my website or anything, oh, I interviewed Adam Neville, by the way. I'll put a link for that in the description for anyone interested. He's a very interesting man, very lovely. But Adam Neville scares me every single time, and if I was to compile my list now, I made one a couple of years ago, my 10 books that actually scared me. It would be taken up with a lot of Adam Neville now if I was to redo it, because now I've read everything that Adam's put out, and no one scares me like him. Also, Ramsey Campbell, he also manages to sew in these really oppressive, frightening atmospheres into his stories, and I don't understand how Ramsey's been writing for longer than King. I think he's got about the same amount of books, like a similar size catalogue. He's beloved, he's award-winning, he's best-selling. He's been scaring people for decades. I don't understand. I don't know why he's been so overshadowed by King. In fact, I think they're friends, so maybe they talked about it. But yeah, Ramsey Campbell is another one that is really good at actually scaring me. Let me look at my shelves now. Oh, Clive Barker writes, but he's also very darkly humorous in his work, so I've been scared but also like amused, tickled at the same time. And I'm just going to throw this out again. I've talked about this before, but there's two short stories that scared the bejesus out of me. Sarah Langan's I Miss You Too Much, from an anthology called Elemental Forces from Flame Tree Press, edited by Mark Morris, and also a story by Brennan LaFaro in his collection Illusions of Isolation, and it's called Just a Note. Those two shorts are two of the scariest. Like, I think I Miss You Too Much by Sarah Langan is the scariest story that I've ever read. That is the most scared I've ever been reading a story. I'm gonna have to make a new list, I think. Anyway, I'd love to know your thoughts. Do you agree, disagree with the list or with my take on the list? I'd love to know. I love talking books. I love talking different opinions on books. Also, if you have any scary suggestions for me, things you think I'd find frightening based on, that I find The Exorcist scary and I found Salem's Lot scary. If you've got any recommendations for me, like based on my tastes, I would love them, because I always hope to be scared by a horror story. It's just it hardly ever happens. I think I read too many of them. But yes, please put any suggestions in the comments for me, because I'm not buying any more books at the moment, but maybe I have something on my TBR that I haven't read that you might suggest. And also, the wish list is ever growing, because once I've finished my current Read What You Own challenge of reading 100 books that I currently own before I buy any more, I am going to treat myself by buying a bunch of books. Bleed!